I think he has an incipient messiah complex.
Hmm.
Incipient messiah complex in a world leader is a really dangerous thing.
One story dominated it. And so I wanted to start our discussion of that story by quoting a line from towards the end of Mean Girls, Tina Fey's parody high school movie, in which, as one girl puts it, I'm going to vote for Regina George because she got hit by that bus. Last week, a week ago today, Donald Trump was indeed shot in the ear. A week on, his momentum towards the White House seems unstoppable as Democrats fall apart and Republicans start wearing bandages in sympathy on their ears. Look, sometimes here in the UK, I think we feel very close to the US. It feels like a very similar nation to our own nation. Sometimes we don't. Matthew Parris, which one of those times do you feel we're currently living through?
Absolutely, we don't at the moment. This kind of thing, I won't say it just doesn't happen in Britain, but it would be so extraordinary, so unusual. And yet, this in the United States is just the latest through history of a long line of assassination attempts. Uh, our politics suddenly begins to look remarkably kind of stable and
Yeah, grown
of the
up.
road. Yeah. When you look at what's happening both on the continent and in the United States, it's rather good to be boring.
I mean, look, Matt, sticking with you for a moment, the response in the US, look, it's a shocking, startling thing when somebody tries to assassinate anyone, let alone a former president, let alone such a sort of attention-grabbing, divisive president as Donald Trump. But the kind of the way the fallout has sort of has panned out, the I don't know, the bandages on the ear, for example, the kind of the cultishness of it. Do you still find this surprising, or is this something we should just understand about the United States by now?
I don't find it surprising. I was at Yale University for 2 years as a postgraduate, and I don't think we should be surprised by this kind of thing in America, but it's another planet to
Yeah.
our own.
Mm.
I, I, Beneath all the sort of froth and God protected me stuff, and crowds cheering the man himself when he appears with a bandaged ear. Beneath all that, I wonder really, though, whether it will make very much difference. Would I, who would not have been voting for Donald Trump, feel remotely more inclined to vote for him because of this? This will drive his dyed-in-the-wool supporters crazy with passion for the man, but I
Mm.
don't think it's going to change things very much.
Well, I would remind you what happened to Regina George after she got hit by that bus, but there we go. Ian Stone, look, one, I found one striking thing this week is Trump and all his fans quite belligerently calling for civility, saying this is what happens when we allow politics to get out of control in the language we use, the hatred and division to grow. This has got to stop. If that has happened in the US, and I think a lot of people would say it has, whose fault is that?
Well, well, that's an interesting question because I don't think it's as simple as saying that the Republicans, it is basically down to them because the Democrats, when George W. Bush was in charge,
Yeah.
spent 8 years, and this is us as well, saying this is the thickest president we've ever seen.
Sure.
And now we pine for the heady heights of the intellectualism of George W. Bush.
Almost worse, the ridicule heaped on Mitt Romney, for example.
All of that stuff, the fact that we call them, that certainly in America, but here as well, they call them the flyover states.
Yeah.
As if we just ignore them as well. So I don't think it's a simple answer to that question. A couple of things. Ears can really bleed. You know that? I nicked myself shaving one time, and honestly, they take a hell of a lot of stopping. So the bandages, that's a slightly strange thing.
She won't like me saying this. My daughter just got her ear pierced, and we're saying to her, if it gets infected, you're going to spend the whole summer with a bandage on that ear. And what are people going to think?
People going to think then.
Yeah.
The other thing is Donald Trump talking about the fact that he's only standing there by the grace of God, and I find it amazing. I mean, look, I pride myself on being godless, I must say,
Right.
but compared to Trump, I am the chief rabbi. I mean, honestly, and this whole the evangelical vote, the cynicism of it. I mean, I don't doubt their faith, right? I mean, in the main, I really don't doubt their faith, but there's only two possibilities. That they don't believe him when he says he's a man of God, but they're prepared to put aside the fact that he's a convicted felon and who knows what else, because he's furthering their agenda, which doesn't seem very Christian to me. or they do believe him, in which case they're idiots.
Well, see, but that's what's interesting. So, like, I was going to talk about J.D. Vance later, the vice president.
Yes.
But one big theme in his book, the Hillbilly Elegy book, where he talks about the sort of the voters of Appalachia, if I'm saying that right, I'm never sure I am, but it is that you do there have this strong streak of people who identify very strongly as Christians, pride themselves on living by Christian values, while completely not doing. Multiple divorces, treating each other terribly, thundering about how important it is to go to church every week while not doing so. And you think that's him.
A certain hypocrisy in religion is what you're talking about there, right?
Well, yes, but not knowing hypocrisy. Just like it's how they live. It's just how it works.
It's another aspect of that country being very, very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very strange, and I agree with Matthew completely. You look at it and they speak the same language as us, and you think things should be familiar, but it's different, isn't it?
I realised when I was much younger, when I was sort of post-university backpacking, and I managed to, and in various places I get drunk with people from all sorts of countries. Even if you don't really share a language, you've got a lot more in common with somebody who's French and German when you get drunk with them than you do with an American.
Yeah.
Things just don't gel. Matt, going back. Sorry, you were going to say, Matthew.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Do we think that Trump himself actually believes that God protected him?
No.
Well, I mean, yes, but
really,
I think. I mean, I would have thought Trump probably believes that God's primary role is protecting him, and if God is interested in other people, that's a failing on God's part. But he probably isn't, don't you think? I mean, Trump probably thinks he and God are sort of pretty much on. They know each other. They're on speaking terms.
Golfing buddies.
They're on the same page. All that kind of thing. Do you think, Matt? Do you think this will change Trump at all? Because I mean, he would look. Whatever one thinks of the man, when getting up after being shot like that, yes, just in the ear, whatever. Getting up, the whole fight thing. That's what they'd call. That's a baller move. That's brave. That is impressive. Whether or not it's driven by ego, which it probably is. But next time, does he really want to step out on a stage again in public? Is that going to be different in the back of his mind?
Judge, but it was impressive, and I think he has an incipient Messiah complex. Incipient Messiah complex in a world leader is a really dangerous thing.
Yeah. I mean,
can we just contemplate that for a second?
I wondered, Matt, if it was like, if it's, and I don't really mean this in a disparaging way, but there's no other way of making it sound. If it's ego, as in like he genuinely what he valued more than basically greater than his anxiety about having just been shot was his anxiety that he might leave the stage in the wrong manner in a way that didn't look good for him. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And he's constantly watching himself, as it were, on television. I think every step of the way. He's not unusual in that respect, though. A lot of politicians are like that.
Yeah.
I just worry, I have an incipient Messiah complex. If a great hand were to come down from the sky now as we speak, pick me up and say, "You're coming home," you must have wondered what all this was about. I would simply have said, "Thank God, Lord. I was wondering when."
You would not be surprised.
I can't really. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a stand-up comic. I can't really criticise anyone with an incipient Messiah complex. Can I just say that this family, the Trump family, are going to plague America for decades. I mean, they are going to be around for decades. I personally think he'll win.
Yeah.
And I think when he wins, I think he'll try and make it so that he can just pass it on. It's more like an empire at that point, and he passes it on to his son.
Do you think, we'll move on from this in just a moment, and I'm going to come back to that specific point as well a little bit later. But one of the things I'm really struggling with, Ian, is that he has already been president, right? From where we're sitting, didn't necessarily look like it went tremendously. The country was not in a great state. All their diplomatic alliances across the world were sort of frayed to the point of ridiculous. During COVID, he was a laughingstock, suggesting people get injected with bleach. His term in office literally ended with an, albeit small, but still an attempted revolution with people storming the Capitol. People actually died, and then he threw into disrepute he disputed the entire American political democratic process, claims for which he was then resoundingly defeated in court. And it's like people look back and go, it's like, what do you think that went well? Do you want more of? I mean, I find it just baffling.
Well, yes, but I think people in America. I mean, I don't know how much good has happened in the last 4 years to them personally.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that Joe Biden fixed a lot of the diplomatic, but what do people in Appalachia care about the diplomatic relations with Europe or with anywhere? Really, they just want, you know, globalization has hit America just like everywhere else, and people have suffered. And maybe under Trump there was a bit more of a feel-good factor. Politics is perception, right?
Yeah.
And maybe their perception was that it was better than it was. Of course, I worry for the country. Some of the women at that conference, Kimberly Guilfoyle and Carrie Lake, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she also talked about an angel coming down with an American flag.
Yeah.
And why didn't the angel come down 10 minutes earlier? Stop the shoot. I mean, just an accident timing.
Why did God want him shot in the ear? That's the thing.
All of those things. But I do worry for America for the future, because I don't think he's going to let go that easily this time. And I don't think he let go easily last time.
Yeah, well, look, we've had... sorry, Matt.
I don't agree with you at all. I find it slightly reassuring that he was president for 4 years and the sun continued to rise in the morning and set in the evening. He did and said a lot of stupid things, but it didn't generally seem to make very much difference. And I would have thought I would be more frightened of a Donald Trump bidding now for the first time to be president than I am when the man has been president and the world continued in its orbit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. Look, we've had a bunch of people getting in touch this morning. One person in particular saying, guys, the UK had 2 MPs assassinated in broad daylight in the last few years. It certainly does happen in the UK, which is, I think, a valuable corrective. Yes. Look, keep getting in touch with us. You can text us on 87222. Start your message with the word Times. You can tweet us using the hashtag Times Radio. Email us on studio@times.radio or WhatsApp us on 0333 003 2353. More with Matt and Ian in just a moment. Obviously, we've got a bit more America to cover before we move on. I want to talk a bit more about America, because although we're not there, it is very exciting. We should, of course, talk about the actual president, Joe Biden. People who have suggested this week that he should stand down appear to include Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and almost everybody else. And yet he seems disinclined to do so. Matthew Parris, do you think, what's going on with Biden? Do you think he doesn't want to stand down because he is a vain man who wants to be president, even though a lot of people think it's a bad idea? Or do you think he has this sort of terror and responsibility of what it means for America if Trump gets back in, and in that same way that we were talking about Messiah complexes earlier, or indeed not even that, just in a practical sense, he thinks he's the person most likely to stop it? Which way do you think that's going for him?
I don't think he's thinking straight. I think his mental processes really have deteriorated, and I imagine there'll be quite a lot of confusion in his mind. I don't think he's even capable of framing the choices, the possibilities in the way that you just have. And that's what makes it so difficult, really, I think, for anybody to reason with him. You can't entirely reason with someone whose reasoning is beginning to fragment.
I mean, but it's just, you know, when you've got Obama saying this, I sort of feel if I was walking along a pier and, you know, Barack Obama appeared to me and said, I think you should jump in, I'd take it seriously. You know, and this is Biden, who worked with Obama for 8 years, Obama who knows what it is to be president, who knows what it takes for a Democrat to win. The fact that he can be ignoring him, if indeed he is ignoring him, maybe it's a bit of a dance leading to something. What do you think about Biden at the moment, Ian? I mean,
well, what Matthew said, really. I mean, I listened to the debate, actually. I was actually at Glastonbury and I got back to where I was staying about 3:30 in the morning. And I thought, the debate's on. And I listened to it. And the moment when he was rambling on, Joe, and Trump at the end said, I don't know what he said at the end of that, and I don't think he did either. And I honestly found myself going, I agree with you, Donald. Yeah. And I thought, I haven't done that much. I think it's a real worry. There's a new video every day. The one yesterday of him talking to a woman who he thought was his wife. And Jill Biden comes over and went, that's not me. Oh. And he went, oh. And you think, this is not a man who's fit to be president. I mean, but again, this goes back to what I was talking about before. We can blame the Republicans for being awful people. But the Democrats have they're not making it easy. Yeah, they're not making it. They're putting a guy who is obviously not capable I mean, it's not just about getting elected. It's a really tough job.
There's some stuff to do after you get elected, famously,
In the West Wing, they were always in the office by 6. They never left before 10. Do you honestly think Joe Biden can do 16-hour days for the next 4 years? We have been, I mean, I've read this and I agree with it. We have been gaslit by the Democratic Party. Said, oh, no, he's fine. And anyone who had eyes, every time he got on the stage and jogged, and you went, mate, stop it. You're fooling no one. I think it's a real worry. I genuinely do. And I think that the quicker he steps down, George Clooney has said it, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about Barack
Forgot
Obama.
about Clooney.
I think if Clooney says it,
I mean, that's a hell of an intervention, isn't it? Come home in your front room, you've got Obama and George Clooney sitting there going, you've made some bad choices.
Sit down, Joe. It's time. And listen, as comedians, we all have mates who we have like close personal friendships with, and they're the ones who we say to, look, if it's gone, please tell me. All right? You know, just like put your arm on my shoulder and say, that's enough, Ian. And I go, really? You go, yeah, that's enough. Someone needs to do that with Joe. And I think they are saying it, but he's not listening.
Well, I mean, Matt, look, I approach this sort of trepidatiously because I don't want to make the wrong links here, but you've got your piece in the magazine today is about why you chose to stop writing a column in the Times after many years. And you basically say you did it because you want to stop doing it before it stops being good, right?
Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm winning, but you know, I'm more or less keeping my head above water, and I think that's the time to quit. Yeah. My great predecessor as a Times columnist was Bernard Levin.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't quit, and he slowly lost his mind. And in the end, the sub-editors were essentially having to write his columns, and nobody dared to ask him or tell him to go. And it was a very sad ending to an absolutely glorious career of a genius of a columnist. Now I'm nowhere near that yet, but it will come. I mean, and in the meantime, you know, I'm 75 in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm looking forward to just having a little more time on my hands.
Well, we'll miss you on the page, Matt. I think we could have sorted this out differently. If we'd had a chat, I could have promised to tell you if it ever got bad, and it certainly never did. But, you know, you've made your choices, and I have to support them, I suppose. Ian, sorry, you were going to say.
No, I was just saying, I think being a Times columnist is one thing, but being President of the United States is another. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying, I don't want to say it's more important.
I take offence at that, I think, yeah.
I'm not saying it's more important. I am saying it's way more important. And, it's time, Joe. It is time. If he listens.
I wonder if the fact, you know, he's got COVID at the moment. I wonder if there's just going to be sort of arranging some exit with dignity.
Didn't he make a video this morning saying he's fighting and he's going to
keep
fighting?
That.
I mean, I know that Margaret Thatcher came out of the meeting and said, I fight and I fight on and whatever. But and people were behind the scenes going, no, you don't, Margaret. But I genuinely think I was going to say someone needs to make an intervention, but if Barack Obama, they already have.
Do you not think as well, though? I mean, both of you, Matt, you first. Might it not just be too late? Like you look at the people who might take over from Biden. You've got Kamala Harris, you've got Gavin Newsom, you've got people like J.B. Pritzker and Gretchen Whitmer, which I just don't know who. I mean, these are just noises to me. I have no idea who these people are. And you kind of, I mean, admittedly, I'm not a voter in America, but you think actually maybe Biden is right that he does have a better chance than anybody else of beating Trump, right, Matt?
Well, because he's left it so long.
Yeah, I mean, it is his own fault, sure. Yeah,
it's now evident that there's going to be a mess. Whatever happens, there'll be a mess if he stays, and there'll certainly be a mess if he goes. But you perhaps understand, I think you do understand American politics better than me. Does he have to voluntarily go? That there must be circumstances in which someone can be removed, although they don't want to be removed.
There are I mean, I'm flattered that you would say that. I don't think I necessarily do, but there are mechanisms by which you can remove a sitting president, although I think they're incredibly difficult. I think it's possible that they could ditch him at the convention. Yeah. As the candidate,
they haven't named him. They haven't formally adopted him as the candidate, as far as I understand. So at the convention, they could say, I don't know. I mean, they just let him down gently. Step forward. Anyone who's going to be a candidate for the president of the United States, not so fast, Mr. Biden. Something like that might be easier just to let him down. But I think there are mechanisms. But it's also about the money that has been raised. It's about getting the campaign behind a new candidate. they have left it too late.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, the best observation I saw was the one that suggested he should step down tomorrow for Kamala Harris entirely, so that all Trump's merchandise, in which he's running to be the 47th president, I think it is rendered obsolete because he'd in fact be the 48th. And I thought that would be
That's funny.
That would be the real troll move, wouldn't it? Look, before we move on from America, which we must do, I want to talk briefly. We talked about him before, about J.D. Vance, his running mate, who's a sort of fascinating figure. He was a sort of almost like a poet of forgotten America, and he now seems to be in his political life saying many things that are almost the direct opposite of what he seemed to be saying beforehand. And he puts his Christianity front and center. Someone texted when we mentioned him before. Greg sent a text saying, listening to two Jews and an atheist debating about Christianity is bizarre. Point taken, Greg. I understand. But with Matt, you first, and we'll deal with this briefly. But Vance generally, do you think he's sincere in the persona he presents, or not sincere? And which of those two would you prefer?
Well, in the Times this morning, you have written an absolutely brilliant "My Week"
Oh, thank you.
by J.D. Vance, but it does leave the reader still wondering, what does he believe? After so many years following politicians, I find attempts to deconstruct the mind of a leading politician and to know how much of what they say they completely believe, how much they believe a little bit, and how much they just cynically know they have to say, I can't do it any longer. I have no idea.
Yeah. What do you think, Ian?
Well, obviously I don't know the guy, but it does feed into the American dream, doesn't it? Really, he grew up dirt poor, didn't he? I mean, Hillbilly Elegy is sort of about that, isn't it? Really, and suddenly he's going to be possibly vice president. So I think people in America like that story. Because even if you are really struggling, you go, look what can happen, even though it's a myth. But look what can happen. As you said, he's had to row back, hasn't he? I mean, he called Trump America's Hitler.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to
Well,
row
he said
back
he
from that.
might be America's Hitler.
He did it. He said he
fair,
might. Yeah,
he might be America's Hitler. Yeah.
So obviously when he speaks to Donald Trump, so when you said might, I didn't think it was a big possibility.
anyone might be.
Yeah. I mean, he obviously raised the stakes. What do I think? I don't think it's good for Ukraine. I think that the reason that they've piled a load of money in beforehand, got a load of money appropriated, is because they had a feeling that this might happen. Listen, I don't think Donald Trump or J.D. Vance being anywhere near the levers of power is a good thing.
Well, so just before we leave this, George Osborne said, I think the last couple of days, his perspective was that he sees what Vance is doing as being actually very similar to what Keir Starmer did when he sort of cozied up to Jeremy Corbyn to be in his cabinet, in that you say the things the base wants to hear and then you become reasonable afterwards. So all I can say is, here's hoping.